In the year 1087, within the monastery of Saint Etienne, servants frantically tear the jeweled robes from a corpse that is still warm. They leave the body of Europe's most powerful monarch to rot on the bare stone floor. The man who reshaped the face of Europe and forced England to speak French ended his journey in utter solitude, betrayed even by his own children. William the Conqueror. History remembers him as a brilliant strategist and the founder of a dynasty. But for his entire life, he ran from a single word that hounded him like the barking of hungry dogs: bastard. The birth of this man provoked a scandalous uproar, and his very survival seemed a violation of all the laws of probability. In a world ruled by thoroughbred aristocrats, the son of a tanner's daughter possessed no rights to the throne. By all accounts, the boy should have vanished without a trace into the shadows of the centuries, sharing the forgotten fate of hundreds of other illegitimate children. However, the unthinkable happened. Instead of breaking under the weight of his lineage, William turned his burning resentment into fuel for the most effective military machine of the Middle Ages. Richard the Fearless, whom we discussed in the last episode, erected an impregnable fortress in Normandy. But his great-grandson, born of forbidden love, hungered for more. He required control over the entire known world. In this episode, we will reveal how a 7-year-old child survived while his guardians were butchered right at his bedside, why the future monarch used brute force to wring a marriage consent from his bride, how a pirate raid on an island escalated into a holy war under the banner of the Pope, and the terrible price England paid for the creation of the Domesday Book. Before us lies not merely a chronicle of battles, but a psychological anatomy of power. We will trace how a traumatized teenager, backed into a corner, transforms into a ruthless tyrant, into a man for whom the life of a subject is nothing more than a digit in a ledger. William proved that history is written by the victors, but he diluted the ink for his chronicle with blood. In 1035, Duke Robert the Devil dies during a pilgrimage to Nicaea, having committed his most audacious act. Before his departure, he forced his barons to swear fealty to his only heir, 7-year-old William. For the Norman nobility, living by the laws of the wolf pack, this oath was not a command, but a signal to begin a driven hunt. The duchy lost its ruler, the son lost his protection, sharp swords left their scabbards. Normandy plunged into a decade of bloody anarchy designed to wipe the bastard from the face of the earth. But the assassins prowling the castles made a fatal error. They underestimated the prey upon whom they had opened the season. Imagine a childhood where lullabies are replaced by the ringing of steel, and nannies wear chainmail beneath their tunics. William grew up not in the quiet of a palace, but in the epicenter of a bloody hurricane. His guardians perished one after another with frightening regularity. One night, the youth woke to the death rattle of his steward, Osborne. In the darkness, the boy froze in terror, paralyzed by terror, listening as an assassin slit the throat of his protector in the very next bed. The blood of the faithful servant literally flooded the bedroom floor. The rebellious barons of Normandy believed that by eliminating his protection, they would turn the heir into an obedient puppet. Fear, by their design, was supposed to break the child's will, but reality betrayed their expectations. Every assassination attempt burned away William's naivety, replacing it with icy paranoia. Instead of surrendering, he learned. The youth memorized the faces of traitors, studied ambush tactics, and realized a single truth. In this world, only the one who strikes first survives. The adversaries who dreamed of seeing his corpse were themselves forging a ruthless tyrant out of a frightened orphan. By 1047, the tension reached a boiling point. William turned 19. By the standards of the era, he was a mature man, yet to the old nobility, he was still just a bastard, occupying someone else's chair. The western barons rallied under the banners of his cousin, Guy of Burgundy. The rebels devised a simple trap: seize the duke in Valognes and sever the dynasty of Rollo. The heir escaped by a miracle. Legend holds that he rode all night, galloping his horse to death to break out of the circle of pursuit. Finding himself at a dead end, the exile makes a move no one could have foreseen. He does not flee into hiding, but races to Paris, to King Henry I, to the very man who, by all logic, should have desired the collapse of Normandy. But William, displaying a devilish persuasiveness, proves to the monarch, "If I fall, these barons will come for your crown next." And the King of France gives him an army. The Valley of Val-ès-Dunes, summer of 1047. Decided here was not merely the fate of the duchy, but the very right of the Normans to exist. The scale of this confrontation was staggering. All of northern France froze in anticipation. If William lost, the region would disintegrate into dozens of petty fiefdoms. Thousands of warriors converged on the battlefield. The air vibrated with the bass rumble of thousands of horsemen. The 19-year-old Duke charges in the first line. Chroniclers describe him as a giant. Legend claims he was capable of skewering a knight through with a spear while at full gallop. In the heat of battle, he personally unhorses the rebels' strongest fighter, Hardez. This blow served as a signal. Seeing the death of their champion, the barons wavered. The waters of the River Orne ran crimson that day. Panic turned the retreat into a slaughter. Thousands of rebels attempting to escape drowned in the current, creating dams out of their own bodies. The victory at Val-ès-Dunes marked the birth of the Conqueror. But why did he not execute the ringleaders? Many expected a sea of blood, yet the Duke displayed a frightening restraint, pardoning his cousin Guy. Behind this gesture lay not mercy, but cold calculation. William understood, a dead enemy is useless, but a pardoned vassal is a tool who owes you his life. He proclaimed the truce of God, forbidding private wars and the construction of castles without his approval. For the first time since the founders, law reigned in Normandy, but it was the law of one man. The ruler proved he could hold power with steel. However, he realized a sword protects the body, but it does not wash away a stigma. To Europe, he remained the bastard. Success on the battlefield gave him control over the land, but it did not grant legitimacy. He remained a powerful yet lonely chieftain, surrounded by ancient dynasties that despised his lineage. He required an alliance that would force kings to recognize him as an equal. He needed blood, not the kind spilled in battle, but the kind that flows in the veins of ancient houses. William turned his gaze to Flanders, to Matilda, granddaughter of the French king and a descendant of Charlemagne. This marriage promised to be his ticket to the major leagues of European politics. Ambassadors set off with rich gifts, confident in their master's success. But Matilda's answer was worse than a slap in the face. The princess publicly declared, "I will never marry a bastard." These words should have ended it. Anyone else would have retreated to salvage their pride. But for William, the rejection served as a challenge. He leapt onto his horse and raced to Bruges, driven by a fury that knew no bounds. His next act would forever change the conception of how one wins the hand of a princess. Legend has it that William intercepted Matilda right on the streets of Bruges as she was returning from Mass. The scene, played out before the eyes of her stunned retinue, resembled a bandit raid more than a courtly courtship. The Duke ignored etiquette and did not bend the knee. Instead, he hauled the princess off her horse by her braids, hurled her into the mud, and, if the chronicles are to be believed, even beat her, after which he galloped away. To a modern viewer, this seems like savagery, yet in the brutal realities of the 11th century, such an act was interpreted not as abuse, but as a display of exceptional political might. Lying in the dust, Matilda saw before her not the tanner's son, but a warrior with an iron will who took what was his without asking. Later, she declared to her father, "I will marry only him, for one must possess great courage to raise a hand against me in your own house." In the eyes of the French king's granddaughter, brute force became the key that unlocked the path to her heart. Having won the woman, William instantly acquired a far more formidable enemy, the Holy See. In 1049, Pope Leo IX officially forbade this union. Formally, the Vatican cited close consanguinity, but in reality, Rome feared the strengthening of Normandy. The Duke faced a choice that would have broken anyone else: give up his lawful wife or challenge the Vicar of God. In that era, excommunication meant not only political death, but a certain ticket to hell. The Norman ruler chose war with heaven. In 1050, he wed Matilda, demonstratively ignoring the papal bull. For long years, the country lay under the weight of an interdict, a ban on all church rites. Temples closed, the people grumbled, but William did not retreat. He believed that the heavens favor strong battalions, not paper decrees. A way out of the deadlock was proposed by a cunning Italian monk, Lanfranc. The future Archbishop of Canterbury found a compromise that satisfied both sides. The couple pledged to atone for their sin by building two majestic monasteries in Caen, the Abbaye aux Hommes and the Abbaye aux Dames. These stone colossi stand to this day as monuments to stubbornness triumphing over dogma. This union laid the foundation for a future empire. Matilda proved herself not as a trophy, but as a brilliant co-ruler. In her husband's absence, she held Normandy in an iron grip, managing the treasury and the courts. The blood of Charlemagne in their children's veins finally washed away the stigma of bastardy. Now they were considered true princes. By the 1060s, William had realized all his father's dreams. He had pacified the barons, married into a royal dynasty, and forced the church to recognize his authority. The moment had arrived when one could exhale and enjoy the triumph. However, the nature of a predator knows no rest. The Duke's gaze turned increasingly to the north, across the misty waters of the English Channel. On the island, the childless King Edward the Confessor was fading. Rich but fractured, England resembled an overripe fruit waiting for a new master. William considered this land his by right of an old promise, but his path was blocked by the golden boy of the Anglo-Saxons, the powerful Earl Harold Godwinson. In 1064, fate presents the Norman with an incredible gift. A storm casts Harold's ship right onto the French coast. The chief rival falls into complete dependence on William. He did not kill his enemy or throw him in a dungeon. He devised something far more sophisticated, to transform a competitor into a vassal using fear and holy relics. The stage was set perfectly. In the city of Bayeux, Harold bowed before an altar to swear an oath of loyalty in exchange for his freedom. The Englishman did not suspect what lay hidden beneath the gilded cloth. This fatal mistake would later cost him not only his crown, but his life. Bayeux, 1064. Harold Godwinson stands frozen before the altar. The Englishman believes this is merely a formality, just another political theater piece capable of extracting him from Norman captivity. William demands an oath of fealty regarding his claims following the death of King Edward. Harold places his palm on a chest draped in cloth and forces out the words. In his mind, this is a coerced oath made with a knife at his throat, devoid of any power. As soon as the echo of the oath fades, William rips away the cover. Harold turns pale. The chest is filled to the brim with the bones of holy martyrs collected from all over Normandy. Before us is no longer a simple deal between two nobles. The Duke has cunningly forced his rival to sign a contract with heaven itself. Now any apostasy turns the Saxon into a damned blasphemer. William didn't just outplay his enemy, he crushed his will before the first clash of swords. In January 1066, the old King Edward the Confessor departs for the other world. Forgetting his icy terror of the relics, Harold is crowned in Westminster. The English nobility rejoices. One of their own, an Anglo-Saxon, sits on the throne. But in Rouen, the news is received in deathly silence. Chronicles describe William thus: upon learning of the betrayal, he did not utter a single word. The Duke merely furiously tore at the lace of his cloak until it snapped. His anger burned with the cold of steel. The Norman realized now he held the perfect trump card, the status of a betrayed victim. William launches an information war of unprecedented scale. Messengers race to Rome with proofs of Harold's perfidy. Pope Alexander II, outraged by the sacrilege, decides on an unprecedented step. The pontiff grants William a consecrated banner and a ring containing a hair of St. Peter. In this instant, a common land grab acquires the status of a crusade. Now, every knight in Europe, hungry for atonement, sees the killing of Englishmen as a path to the salvation of their soul. Professional swords from across the continent flock to the Duke's flags, from Brittany to southern Italy. In the spring of 1066, the heavens send a sign. Halley's comet flares in the night sky. The medieval world freezes in premonition of disaster. You have come, a source of tears for many mothers, the monks record. Harold sees his doom in the hairy star, while William calls it a celestial sword. 700 ships, for which entire forests were felled, fill the estuary of the River Dives. This armada was so immense that it exceeded the entire population of London at the time. William was preparing to ferry a whole city of professional killers across the Channel. But nature intervenes in the game. The wind stubbornly blows toward the mainland. A week, 2, a month. The fleet is trapped. Supplies are dwindling. Mercenaries begin to grumble. William prays daily in the church, never taking his eyes off the weather vane. He understands. Delay gifts Harold time to fortify the coasts. Desperate, the Duke orders the relics of St. Valery to be brought out and carried in a religious procession. And a miracle occurs. On the evening of September 27th, the weather vanes turn. The wind changes direction. "Raise the sails!" thunders William's order. The flagship Mora, a gift from his wife Matilda, races ahead of everyone. The ship is so swift that by dawn the Duke finds himself completely alone in the middle of the Channel.
He calmly eats breakfast on the deck, washing down his anxiety with wine, until the horizon is finally blanketed by hundreds of sails. Ahead lies Pevensey Beach, a battle destined to decide who is the true ruler, the oathbreaker or the bastard under the papal banner. Stepping onto the shore, William stumbles and falls face down. The soldiers freeze. God is against us. But the Duke instantly leaps up with handfuls of sand and shouts, "Look, I have already taken this land with my own hands." He masterfully turns even a blunder into a triumph. But Harold is already rushing south, flushed with victory over the Vikings and ready to throw the invaders into the sea. The clock is ticking. Only a few days remain until the bloodiest Saturday in the history of England.
Morning, October 14th, 1066. Senlac Hill. William looks up, realizing before him lies a death sentence. Harold's army has not merely occupied the high ground, it has transformed into a living fortress. The famous Saxon shield wall. Thousands of warriors stand shoulder to shoulder, locking their barrier so tightly that, in the words of chroniclers, the dead had nowhere to fall. A forest of spears bristled before the invaders, threatening to bury the Norman cavalry. The battle erupted at 9 in the morning. The first hours turned into a nightmare for William. Norman arrows bounced harmlessly off the armored formation like raindrops. Mounted knights, the pride of Europe, bogged down in the mud and perished under heavy axes. This terrifying weapon could cleave a rider and his horse in two with a single swing. The Duke watched as the dream of a crown drowned in the blood of his men. A frontal assault on the fortified height looked like suicide. Then catastrophe struck. A piercing scream tore through the ranks of the invaders. "The Duke is killed!" Someone saw William's horse go down. Panic, like a virus, seized the army faster than the plague. The left flank of the Bretons wavered and turned to flee, dragging the others with them. Collapse seemed inevitable. One more minute, and the retreat would become fatal. Harold needed only to give the signal for a general charge to drive the Normans into the cold sea. In this moment, William decides on an act worthy of a cinema screen, but absolutely insane for reality. Right in the thick of the slaughter, he rips his helmet from his head. His face is exposed. Any stray arrow could end his life instantly, but the Duke needs to be seen. He races to cut off the retreating men, waving his sword, and roars, drowning out the clash of steel. "Look at me! I am alive, and with God's help, I will conquer!" The warriors freeze. Shock is replaced by shame, and then by fury. The flight ceases. Risking his head, William turns the army around by the sheer force of his will alone. However, the locked formation on the hill held firm. Brute force had choked, and so William deploys Norman cunning. He notices the Saxons, emboldened by success, are ready to break rank for the sake of pursuit. They hunger for a chase, we shall give them one. The Duke orders his knights to attack, and then immediately, feigning terror, to rush back. A devilish gambit plays out. Seeing the backs of their enemies, the Englishmen forget their orders. The instinct of the hunter defeats discipline. "The cowards run!" The Saxons rejoice, and thousands rush down, destroying their own impregnable wall. The moment they descended onto the plain, the trap snapped shut. At William's signal, the fleeing horsemen wheel their mounts around. Harold's infantry, having lost their formation, find themselves one-on-one with heavy cavalry in open terrain. The massacre began. By evening, the slopes of Senlac were hidden beneath the bodies of the fallen, but resistance lasted as long as the king breathed. The story of the arrow striking Harold in the eye became a legend. However, early sources and the Bayeux tapestry paint a far more gruesome picture. A group of knights broke through to the standard. The king was not simply killed, he was hacked to pieces. Only Edith Swanneck could identify the remains by marks known only to her. With the setting of the sun, the Anglo-Saxon era faded into oblivion. William ordered a feast table to be set right amidst the bloody corpses, there where the royal standard had fallen. He ate and drank, gazing upon the dead faces of those who, just that morning, had branded him a bastard. From this moment on, he is the Conqueror. But on that evening of triumph, the victor made a miscalculation, deciding that the country was conquered. He did not yet know the real war against a people burning with hatred was only just beginning. And to hold the throne, he would have to transform into a monster that England would never forget. William's coronation on Christmas Day, 1066, turned into a bloody farce. When the Saxons inside Westminster Abbey shouted their approval to welcome the new monarch, the Norman guards outside mistook the noise for the start of a riot. In a panic, the knights set fire to the surrounding buildings. William accepted the crown with trembling hands in an emptying cathedral, choking on acrid smoke, while outside the walls, his own soldiers methodically slaughtered his new subjects. This scene laid the foundation for his entire reign. He received the title, but he did not gain loyalty. England did not submit. The North rose in rebellion. In 1069, William's patience finally ran out. He decided, if the English refuse to serve him while living, they will serve him dead. A punitive operation began, known to history as the Harrying of the North. What transpired went beyond the bounds of war, turning into conscious genocide. The monarch ordered the burning not only of villages, but of grain reserves, the breaking of plows, and the slaughter of livestock. The conqueror erased the very possibility of life. Appreciate the scale of this tragedy. On the lands from York to Durham, a deathly silence reigned. Chronicles testify that desperate people ate horses, dogs, and even human flesh. Corpses rotted along the roads, with no one left to commit them to the earth. William created a desert and called it peace. More than 100,000 people died of starvation, a figure terrifying for that era. The crime appeared so monstrous that even the Duke himself, before his death, repented for what he had done, fearing God's judgment. The ruler who craved recognition appeared in the eyes of the people as the devil in the flesh. Having broken resistance with the sword, William decided to cement his success with bureaucracy. In 1086, he launches a project unprecedented for his time, the Domesday Book. Scribes were dispatched to all corners of England with a strict order: record everything. Every scrap of land, cow, pig, or plow ended up in the register. The project pursued goals broader than a simple census. It demonstrated an act of total ownership. The king sought to calculate every penny that could be squeezed from the conquered country. Saxon chroniclers noted with horror, "It is shameful to tell, but he did not think it shameful to do. Not a single ox was left unlisted." England turned into a personal estate. William took the land from an entire people and recorded the theft in a ledger. But history has a specific sense of humor. The man who owned an entire country ultimately lost control over his own body. In 1087, during a French campaign, William received a fatal injury, striking his stomach against the pommel of his saddle. His demise at the priory of Saint Gervais turned into a nightmare. Scarcely had the spirit left the king when servants and doctors looted the chambers. They stripped him of his clothes, stole the weapons and furniture,
leaving the naked body of the great conqueror to lie on the floor. The funeral turned into a grotesque spectacle. Swollen from disease, William's body would not fit into the stone sarcophagus. When the gravediggers tried to force the deceased into the coffin, the tissues burst. A foul stench filled the church instantly. The priests, pinching their noses, hurriedly mumbled their prayers and fled. The man before whom Europe trembled departed into eternity to the sound of his retinue retching. Thus ended the path of William the Bastard. He spent a life proving his right to greatness. He seized a kingdom, erected castles, rewrote laws. Yet in the finale, he remained who he was at the start. A lonely boy in a ring of enemies, whose power rested only on fear. His blood forever changed England, but England could never forgive him.
William the Conqueror achieved the impossible. He erased the brand of the bastard and turned a daring raid into the foundation of a future superpower. However, the paradox of his legacy did not lie in his inglorious finale. The man who counted every ear of grain in his domains left his descendants not only fortress walls, but the very structure of modern Britain. His empire did not survive its creator as a unified whole. William disposed of his lands like personal furniture, dividing the inheritance among his sons. Robert took Normandy, and William Rufus placed the English crown upon his head. The sword that forged unity was lowered, and the monolith cracked. But the main change proved irreversible. The conqueror uprooted the Anglo-Saxon nobility, filling the vacuum with loyal barons. He did not simply replace the monarch, he completely renewed the ruling class, forever rewriting the genetic code of the nation. This path teaches us an important truth. Genuine triumph is not the seizure of territories, but the irreversible alteration of their essence. While William pacified the north and laid the foundations of the state, a new fire was already flaring up in the south of Europe. There, under the azure sky of Italy, a different pack of wolves was gathering, led by a thirst for glory rather than birthright. Robert Guiscard began his path as a wandering bandit and ended it as the nightmare of Byzantine Caesars. He proved the Norman spirit is equally ferocious in cold storms and under the scorching sun of the Mediterranean. Subscribe to see the beginning of a new chapter in our cycle. Like this video if the fate of the conqueror impressed you. And write in the comments, did England become stronger having lost its old elite? Thank you for being with us. See you soon.